Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Dad, hide under the bed. My 8-year-old's shocking revelation of my wife's betrayal and my payback. What began as a normal marriage turned into a nightmare of lies, secret condos, and a pregnancy that wasn't mine. I was a builder by trade, but nothing prepared me for dismantling the carefully crafted life I thought I had. Instead of rage, I chose strategy, and what came next was a masterclass in revenge, justice, and rebuilding from the ruins. Let's start from the moment I realized. My marriage was nothing but smoke and mirrors. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. The Sandia Mountains cast their purple shadows across Albuquerque, as Calvin Mitchell stood on his backyard deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and crimson. At 45, he had everything a man could want, or so he told himself every morning while shaving in the marble bathroom of their Northeast Heights home. "Daddy, look what I made!" His daughter Kristen burst through the sliding door, brandishing a crayon drawing of their family. 3 stick figures stood beneath a yellow sun, holding hands. Calvin knelt beside her, his weathered hands from years of construction work gently taking the paper. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Is that Mommy in the middle?" "Yeah. She's wearing her special necklace, the one you gave her." Kristen traced her finger over the squiggly line around the stick figure's neck. That necklace. Calvin's chest tightened with a familiar warmth. He'd bought it with the first real money from selling his startup 5 years ago. Patricia had cried when he fastened it around her neck, promising she'd never take it off. "Calvin, are you out here?" Patricia's voice drifted from inside, carrying that slight edge it had acquired lately. She appeared in the doorway, her marketing executive suit still crisp despite the long day. At 42, she maintained the same sleek beauty that had captivated him at that construction industry mixer 15 years ago. "Just watching the sunset with our artist," he said, standing to kiss her cheek. She turned slightly, and his lips grazed her jaw instead. "I need to pack. Another emergency meeting in Dallas this weekend." She avoided his eyes, adjusting the collar of her blouse, and he noticed the necklace wasn't there. "Where's your—" "In my jewelry box. The clasp was irritating my skin." She brushed past him into the house. "Can you handle bedtime?" "I have calls to make." Calvin watched her retreat, the sound of her heels clicking on the tile floor. Kristen tugged at his shirt. "Is Mommy mad?" "No, baby. Just tired from work." Later that evening, Calvin found himself in their garage, reorganizing tools he'd already organized last month. His hands needed something to do while his mind churned. The empty wine bottle in the recycling bin caught his eye. Chateau Margaux, the expensive stuff Patricia only drank on special occasions. When had she opened that? His phone buzzed. Jerry Rodriguez, his best friend since college and now a successful lawyer, had sent a text. "Poker night Friday? The guys are asking." Calvin typed back, "Can't. Patricia's in Dallas and I've got Kristen." "Again, that's the 3rd weekend this month, brother." Calvin stared at the message, then deleted his half-typed response. Was it the 3rd? He'd lost count. The garage suddenly felt suffocating. He walked to Patricia's Lexus, running his hand along its spotless surface. She took better care of this car than anything else they owned. On impulse, he opened the trunk to grab the emergency kit he'd been meaning to check. That's when he saw it, a small boutique bag tucked behind the spare tire. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a set of lingerie with the tag still on. La Perla. Expensive. The kind of thing she used to surprise him with on anniversaries. "Just browsing old stuff from last year," he could already hear her saying if he asked. But the receipt in the bag was dated last Tuesday. Calvin carefully replaced everything exactly as he'd found it. His construction-trained eye for detail served him well. Patricia would never know he'd seen it. But as he closed the trunk, his wedding ring caught the light, and for the first time in 15 years, it felt heavy on his finger. Inside, he found Patricia in her home office, laptop open, speaking in hushed tones on her phone. She glanced up, covering the mouthpiece. "Yes, Mr. Chen, I understand the timeline is critical," she said louder for his benefit. But Calvin had worked enough job sites to recognize a performance when he saw one. He backed out quietly, heading to Kristen's room instead. His daughter lay in bed, clutching a stuffed elephant, her drawing prominently displayed on her nightstand. "Daddy, will you stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course, baby." He sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her dark hair, Patricia's hair. "Mommy smells different," Kristen said sleepily. "Like flowers, but not her normal flowers." Calvin's hand stilled. "What do you mean?" "When she comes home sometimes. And she takes really long showers after talking to Mr. Miles on the phone. Miles Montgomery, Patricia's boss, CEO of Montgomery Real Estate Development, the man who'd hired Patricia 3 years ago and promoted her twice since." "How do you know she talks to Mr. Miles?" "She says his name a lot. Then she goes in the bathroom and runs the water forever." Kristen yawned. "Is that weird?" "No, sweetheart. Grown-up work is just complicated sometimes." Calvin kissed her forehead, his mind racing. Sweet dreams. He waited until her breathing deepened, then walked to the master bedroom. Through the bathroom door, he could hear Patricia's shower running had been for 20 minutes now. Her phone lay on the dresser, screen dark. Calvin picked up their framed wedding photo from Santa Fe, studying their younger selves. Patricia wore the necklace even then, a simpler piece he'd saved 6 months to buy. They looked so certain, so complete. The shower stopped. Calvin set the photo down and headed downstairs, needing distance, needing air, needing something he couldn't name. In the kitchen, he poured himself a scotch, the good stuff. Why not? And stood at the window overlooking their manicured yard. Everything looked perfect from here. The pool they'd installed last year, the outdoor kitchen where they'd hosted Patricia's company barbecue, the swing set where Kristen played every afternoon. But perfection, Calvin was learning, could hide a multitude of sins. And as he sipped his scotch, watching the automatic sprinklers kick on across their flawless lawn, he wondered how long he'd been watering dead grass. Morning arrived with the harsh New Mexico sun streaming through the bedroom windows. Calvin woke alone, Patricia's side of the bed already cold, though her alarm wasn't set to go off for another hour. He found her in the kitchen, dressed for work, scrolling through her phone while coffee brewed. "You're up early," he said, pouring himself a mug. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind with this Dallas trip." She didn't look up from her screen. "I might need to stay through Monday. The client's being difficult." "Which client?" Calvin kept his voice casual, adding cream to his coffee. Patricia's thumb paused mid-scroll. "The Riverside Development Group. You wouldn't know them." But Calvin did know them. He'd bid on their construction project last month and lost to a company Miles Montgomery had recommended. Small world getting smaller. After Patricia left a quick peck on his cheek and promises to call Calvin, dropped Kristen at school and headed to his office. Mitchell Construction occupied a modest building in the North Valley, nothing fancy but solid, like everything Calvin built. "Morning, boss." His foreman, Danny Chavez, looked up from blueprints spread across the conference table. "That inspection on the Coronado project is set for 2. Calvin nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. "Danny, you still tight with your cousin at the phone company?" "Miguel? Yeah, why?" "Just wondering about those family tracking apps. Kristen's getting older. Might be good for safety." Danny laughed. "My wife has us all on one. Can't make a move without her knowing. I'll ask Miguel about the technical stuff." Calvin spent the morning trying to focus on work, but his concentration shattered when Jerry called. "Lunch at Sadie's? I'm buying." They met at the old restaurant on 4th Street, away from the downtown crowd. Jerry, immaculate in his 3-piece suit despite the heat, studied Calvin over his chile rellenos. "You look like hell, brother." "Thanks. Charming as always." "I'm serious. What's going on? And don't say nothing, I've known you too long." Calvin pushed beans around his plate. "Remember when you installed that security system at your house? The one with all the tracking features?" Jerry's expression sharpened. He was a defense attorney, trained to read between lines. "I remember. Why?" "Patricia's been distant, working weekends, late meetings, and there's things that don't add up." "Things?" Calvin told him about the lingerie, the showers, Kristen's innocent observations. Jerry listened without interrupting, his lawyer face giving nothing away. "You could be reading too much into this," Jerry said finally. "Stress does weird things to marriages." "Maybe." Calvin met his friend's eyes. "But what if I'm not?" Jerry sighed, pulling out his phone. "I'm sending you a link. It's for a location-sharing app completely legal if you're both on the family plan. But Calvin, be sure you want to go down this road. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss." That afternoon, Calvin stood in his home office, Patricia's laptop open before him. She'd given him her password years ago, Kristen's birthday, and never changed it. "Trust," she'd said then, "the foundation of marriage." Her email loaded thousands of messages in neat folders. Work, personal, family, all organized with Patricia's meticulous precision. He clicked on her calendar. The Dallas trip was there, blocked out Friday through Sunday. But when he cross-referenced with her sent emails, he found no correspondence with Riverside Development Group in the past month. His phone rang. "Patricia. Hi, honey. Made it to Dallas safely. The traffic from the airport was awful. Glad you're safe." Calvin minimized her laptop screen. "Which hotel?" "The Hilton downtown. Listen, I need to run to this meeting. Kiss Kristen for me?" After she hung up, Calvin Googled Dallas Hilton. Then, on impulse, he called. "Dallas Hilton, how may I direct your call?" "I'd like to confirm a reservation. Patricia Mitchell checking in today?" Keyboard clicks. "I'm sorry, sir, we have no reservation under that name." Calvin's throat tightened. "Could you check Patricia Montgomery?" "No, sir, nothing under that name either." He hung up, hands trembling slightly. Back at Patricia's laptop, he opened a new search. Montgomery Real Estate Development, El Dorado Hotel. The results loaded instantly. Miles Montgomery, major shareholder, on the board of directors. Calvin called the El Dorado in Albuquerque. "Could you check if Patricia Mitchell has a reservation this weekend?" "One moment. Yes, sir. Miss Mitchell is booked for our luxury suite, checking in at 3 p.m. today." Calvin closed the laptop carefully, his mind surprisingly clear. He walked to their bedroom, to Patricia's jewelry box on the dresser. The necklace lay coiled inside, the one she'd worn every day for 5 years until recently. He picked it up, feeling its familiar weight. Back in his truck, he drove aimlessly through the city, past the church where they'd married, the hospital where Kristen was born, the first apartment they'd shared, now renovated into condos. All these landmarks of a life built together, brick by careful brick. His phone buzzed. A text from Patricia's sister, Teresa. "Hey, can I borrow $5K? I swear it's the last time." Calvin almost ignored it. Teresa's gambling debts were legendary, but something made him call her instead. "Calvin, my favorite brother-in-law." "Your only brother-in-law. What's the money for, Teresa?" "Just some temporary cash flow issues. But hey, congrats on Patricia's new investment. That Tanoan condo must have cost a fortune." Calvin's foot hit the brake. "What condo?" "The one in Tanoan Country Club. Patricia showed me the listing last month. Said it was an investment property, but between you and me, I think Miles talked her into it. Guy's got an eye for real estate." "Right. The investment property." Calvin's voice sounded strange to his own ears. "Listen, Teresa, I'll call you back about the loan. Tanoan Country Club, the most exclusive neighborhood in Albuquerque. Calvin knew it well. He'd built 3 houses there, though he could never afford to live in one. He drove there now, past the guard gate where his contractor credentials still got him through. The afternoon sun beat down on empty streets lined with multi-million-dollar homes. He didn't know what he was looking for until he saw it, Patricia's Lexus parked in a driveway on Tanoan Hills Place. Calvin parked 3 houses down, his pulse hammering. The house was new construction, maybe 6 months old, not one of his. Through the front windows, he could see modern furniture, abstract art on the walls. A place designed to impress. He sat there for an hour, watching. Nothing moved. No one came or went. Just Patricia's car in the driveway of a house she'd never mentioned, in a neighborhood they'd never discussed, representing money they didn't have, unless they did. Unless there were things about their finances Patricia hadn't shared. Unless 15 years of marriage had become a careful construction of half-truths and hidden rooms. Calvin drove home as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky the color of dried blood. He picked up Kristen from after-school care, helped with homework, made dinner. Normal evening routines that felt like acting now. "Is Mommy coming home tonight?" Kristen asked over mac and cheese. "Not tonight, baby. She's working in Dallas." "Oh." Kristen pushed pasta around her plate. "Daddy, do you ever play hide and seek at work? Sometimes we have to find things that are hidden. Why?" "Mommy and Mr. Miles play it sometimes. I heard Mommy laughing on the phone about hiding from someone." She looked up with innocent eyes. "But hide and seek is more fun when everyone knows they're playing, right?" Calvin forced a smile. "That's right, sweetheart. It's only fun when everyone knows the rules." Saturday morning crawled in with overcast skies, unusual for Albuquerque. Calvin made pancakes for Kristen, their weekend tradition, while his phone sat silent on the counter. Patricia hadn't called since yesterday afternoon. "Can we go to the zoo today?" Kristen asked, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "Maybe later, baby. Daddy has some errands to run first." He'd barely slept, his mind replaying every late night, every weekend trip, every time Patricia's stories didn't quite align. The construction business had taught him to spot structural flaws, and his marriage was showing cracks he'd been too blind to see. After dropping Kristen at Jerry's house, "Just for a few hours, I promise," Calvin drove back to Tanoan. Patricia's car was gone, but he needed to see that house again, needed to confirm he hadn't imagined it. He parked in the same spot, studying the property. Modern architecture, probably a $2 million build, the kind of place Patricia had always admired in magazines. "Someday," she'd say, flipping through glossy pages, "when the business really takes off." Calvin's phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Mitchell? This is Tom Watson from Cybersecurities. Your friend Jerry Rodriguez asked me to call." Calvin remembered Jerry's investigator, the one who'd helped with that corporate espionage case last year. "What can you tell me about phone tracking, Tom? Depends what you need. But if you're on the same family plan, it's all legal. Email, too, if you have passwords. Want me to set something up?" "I'll let you know." Calvin hung up and dialed Patricia's sister again. Teresa answered on the fifth ring, voices and slot machine sounds in the background. "Calvin, you reconsidering that loan?" "Tell me about the condo, Teresa. When exactly did Patricia show it to you?" "Oh, about 6 weeks ago? She was all excited, going on about equity and investment potential. Miles was there too, showing us the amenities. That infinity pool is insane." "Miles was there." "Yeah, he drove separately though. Patricia said something about not wanting to make it obvious at work. You know, favoritism and all that." Teresa paused. "Wait, you didn't know about this?" "Of course I knew," Calvin lied smoothly. "Just checking dates for tax purposes. Thanks, Teresa." He drove home, each mile adding weight to his chest. In his office, he pulled up their bank statements. Their joint accounts showed no large withdrawals, no evidence of a down payment on a $2 million condo, which meant Patricia had money he didn't know about. Which meant, "Daddy!" Kristen's voice made him jump. Jerry stood in the doorway, looking apologetic. "Sorry, brother. She insisted on coming home for her swimsuit. Something about a pool party later?" "Right. The Martins' party." Calvin had forgotten. Normal suburban life grinding on while his world tilted off its axis. While Kristen ran upstairs, Jerry closed the office door. "You look worse than yesterday." Calvin told him about the condo, about Teresa's revelation. Jerry's expression darkened with each word. "You need documentation," Jerry said. "If this goes where I think it's going, you need everything in writing. Financials, property records, all of it." "If what goes where?" Jerry gripped his shoulder. "Come on, Calvin. You build things for a living. You know when a foundation's compromised." After they left, Calvin sat in his empty house, Patricia's laptop open again. This time he dug deeper into folders marked personal projects and future planning. What he found made his hands shake. Emails between Patricia and a real estate agent, discussing the Tanoan property. Bank statements from an account he'd never seen, showing deposits that matched her quarterly bonuses she'd told him went to their joint savings. And in her downloads folder, a PDF titled PMMM Tanoan Investment LLC. Patricia Mitchell, Miles Montgomery. Calvin printed everything, his contractor's mind already compartmentalizing, organizing evidence like building materials. When his phone finally rang Patricia's ringtone, he let it go to voicemail. "Hi, honey. Crazy day here. Meeting's running long. I might grab dinner with the client team. Give Kristen a kiss for me. Love you. Love you." The words sat like ash in his mouth. That evening, he took Kristen to the Martins' pool party, playing the role of normal dad while his world burned down quietly. He watched his daughter splash with her friends, remembering the day they'd brought her home from the hospital. Patricia had cried then, holding their baby, promising to give her everything. "Calvin, grab a beer?" Bob Martin, neighborhood good guy, waved from the grill. Calvin joined the circle of suburban dads, half listening to talk about property taxes and youth soccer leagues. Normal concerns for normal people with normal marriages. "Where's Patricia?" Bob's wife, Linda, appeared with a tray of margaritas. "I haven't seen her in weeks. Work trip, Dallas. Again? That woman works too hard. Though I shouldn't talk, I ran into her at that new spa in Tanoan last week. If that's working too hard, sign me up." Linda laughed, not noticing how Calvin's smile froze. He excused himself, claiming a work call, and walked to the far end of the yard. The Sandias loomed in the distance, unchanging while everything else shifted like sand. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Your wife's not in Dallas." Calvin's blood chilled. He typed back, "Who is this?" "Someone who thinks you should know the truth. Check the El Dorado Hotel, room 2012. Tonight." "Who are you?" No response. Calvin looked back at the party, at Kristen doing cannonballs off the diving board. His daughter, innocent and trusting. The kind of kid who still believed in hide and seek as a fun game, not a way of life. He made his excuses to the Martins' emergency at a job site and arranged for Kristen to stay for the sleepover she'd been begging to attend anyway. Then he drove toward Old Town, toward the El Dorado Hotel, his wedding ring catching the setting sun through the windshield. The hotel lobby gleamed with Southwest elegance, all adobe and turquoise. Calvin approached the concierge, his contractor's confidence serving him well. "I'm meeting my wife in room 2012. Patricia Mitchell, could you ring up and let her know I'm here?" The concierge checked his screen. "Yes, Miss Mitchell checked in yesterday. Would you like me to call the room?" "No, I'll surprise her. She's expecting me." The elevator ride to the 20th floor lasted forever and an instant. Calvin walked down the hushed hallway, his work boots silent on thick carpet. Room 2012 sat at the end, a corner suite. The door was slightly ajar, caught on the security latch. Through the gap, he heard laughter. Patricia's laughter, free and light in a way he hadn't heard in months. Then a man's voice, low and intimate. "We can't keep doing this, Pat. He's going to figure it out." "Calvin?" Patricia laughed again, but cruel this time. "Please, he's too trusting for his own good. Still thinks I wear that ugly necklace he bought me." "The startup money necklace?" "God, yes. As if selling one tiny company makes him some tech genius. He's a construction worker with pretensions, Miles. Nothing more." Calvin stepped back from the door, his chest tight, breathing shallow. 15 years of building a life together, and this was the foundation. Patricia in a hotel room with her boss, laughing at the man who'd loved her through everything. He could confront them now, burst in, make a scene, play the wronged husband. But Calvin Mitchell was a builder, a planner. He knew that the best demolitions were controlled, precise, total destruction with minimal collateral damage, especially when there was an 80-year-old girl who still believed her parents hung the moon. Calvin walked back to the elevator, pulling out his phone. He scrolled to Tom Watson's number, the investigator Jerry had recommended. "Tom? It's Calvin Mitchell. I need your help. Full surveillance package." "When do you want to start?" Calvin looked back down the hallway, toward the room where his wife was rewriting their history with another man's hands. "Now! Start now." He drove home through empty Saturday night streets, past couples walking dogs and families leaving restaurants. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that parallel worlds existed in the same space, one where marriages were real, and one where they were just elaborate games of hide and seek. At home, Calvin poured himself that good scotch again and sat in his office, surrounded by the evidence he'd printed. Bank statements, emails, the business registration for PMMM Tanoan Investment LLC. All the pieces of Patricia's double life, laid out like blueprints. His phone rang. Patricia. This time he answered. "Hi, honey," she said, and he could hear the hotel room's air conditioning in the background. "How was your day?" "Good. Took Kristen to the Martins' pool party." "Oh, I forgot that was today. I'm so sorry I missed it." "She's sleeping over there. How's Dallas?" "Exhausting. These clients are impossible. I probably won't be home until late Monday." "Take your time," Calvin said, meaning it. "I've got everything covered here." After they hung up after the love yous that meant nothing, Calvin opened a new document on his computer. At the top he typed, Operation Hurricane. If Patricia wanted to play games, he'd show her how a master builder played. Not with emotion or impulse, but with planning, precision, and patience. The storm was coming. She just didn't know it yet. Sunday morning arrived with Kristen bouncing on Calvin's bed, still in her pajamas from the sleepover, syrup stains on her unicorn shirt. "Daddy! Mrs. Martin made cinnamon rolls. Can we make some?" "Sure, baby." Calvin sat up, his head foggy from too little sleep and too much scotch. "Let me shower first." In the bathroom mirror, he looked older than his 45 years. When had those lines appeared? When had his eyes gotten so tired? He thought of Patricia in that hotel room, laughing at him with Miles Montgomery, and felt something cold settle in his chest. Not rage that had burned out sometime around 3 a.m. This was clearer, sharper, purpose. Downstairs, while Kristen chattered about the sleepover, Calvin's phone buzzed. Tom Watson had sent a preliminary report. Patricia's phone GPS showed her at the El Dorado Hotel all night. Her credit card had been used at the hotel restaurant, charges for two. Calvin archived the information and focused on mixing cinnamon roll dough with his daughter. "Daddy, can we play hide and seek after breakfast?" Kristen asked, flour dusting her nose. "Maybe later, sweetheart." "Please? Mommy and I play sometimes when you're at work. I'm really good at finding hiding spots." Calvin's hand stilled on the mixing bowl. "Oh yeah? Where do you like to hide?" "Under beds is best. Once I hid under your bed and Mommy didn't find me for ages. She came in with Mr. Au. Miles and they were talking and didn't even know I was there." The kitchen seemed to tilt. Calvin gripped the counter, forcing his voice steady. "When was this, baby?" "I don't know. A while ago? They were being really loud, so I stayed quiet like a mouse." Kristen giggled. "Mommy says Mr. Miles is helping her with a surprise for you. Are you surprised?" Calvin looked at his daughter innocent, trusting, 8 years old and keeping secrets she didn't understand. "Very surprised." They finished the cinnamon rolls in relative quiet, Kristen humming Disney songs while Calvin's mind raced, his daughter under their bed while Patricia and Miles. He couldn't complete the thought, wouldn't. After breakfast, he set Kristen up with a movie and retreated to his office. Jerry answered on the second ring. "You sound rough, brother." "I need Samantha Chen's number, the divorce attorney you mentioned." Silence. Then, "You sure?" "My daughter was under the bed, Jerry, while they—" Calvin's voice cracked. "She was under the bed. Jesus Christ, I'll text you her contact. She doesn't usually work Sundays, but for this, I'll pay whatever it takes." Samantha Chen called back within an hour, her voice crisp and professional despite the weekend interruption. Calvin gave her the basics: the affair, the secret property, the hidden money. "And you have documentation?" she asked. "Some. Getting more." "Good. Keep everything." "Record conversations if New Mexico's one-party consent allows, it does." "Even better. Mr. Mitchell, I know this is difficult, but we need to be strategic. Do you know how long the affair has been going on?" Calvin thought of Kristen under the bed, of weekend trips multiplying over months. At least 6 months. Maybe longer. "And your daughter? How much does she know?" "She doesn't understand what she's seen. Thinks it's all games and surprises." "Let's keep it that way. Children shouldn't be weapons in divorce proceedings." Samantha paused. "Though sometimes they're the most honest witnesses we have." After the call, Calvin found Kristen building a fort in the living room, every cushion and blanket in the house conscripted for her architecture. "Want to help?" she asked. Calvin crawled into the fort with her, remembering when his biggest concern was making sure these childhood moments lasted. Now he wondered how many he'd already lost to Patricia's deceptions. Daddy, why do grown-ups keep secrets? Calvin studied his daughter's serious face. What kind of secrets? Like when Mommy tells me not to tell you about stuff. She says it's our girl secret, but secrets feel weird. What kind of stuff does Mommy ask you not to tell? Kristen picked at a loose thread on a pillow. Like when we go to the big house with the pool, or when Mr. Miles brings her flowers, or when she cries in the bathroom after talking to Aunt Teresa. Each revelation was another brick in the wall Calvin was building between his old life and whatever came next. You don't have to keep secrets from me, baby, ever. But Mommy said, I know what Mommy said, but I'm saying you can tell me anything, okay? No more secrets in this house. Kristen nodded solemnly, then brightened. Want to play hide and seek now? The innocent question hit Calvin like a physical blow. His daughter's favorite game, tainted now by association with Patricia's betrayal. But he forced a smile. Sure, sweetheart. You hide first. As Kristen ran off giggling, Calvin sat in the wreckage of the fort, thinking about hiding places. How Patricia had hidden her true self, how Miles Montgomery had hidden in plain sight, how truth could hide under beds and behind closed doors and in secret bank accounts. His phone buzzed. Patricia, missing my two favorite people. Dallas is so boring without you. Home tomorrow evening. Can't wait to see you both. Love you. Calvin stared at the message, then typed back. We miss you too. Kristen's been asking about you. It wasn't a lie. Kristen had been asking, just not the questions Patricia would want to answer. Found you. Kristen pounced from behind the couch, laughing. You're terrible at hiding, Daddy. Guess I need more practice, Calvin said, hugging her tight. But he was learning to hide his knowledge, his plans, his rage, learning to play Patricia's game while building his own. The afternoon wore on with normal Sunday activities, groceries, laundry, homework. Calvin documented everything in photos on his phone, him helping with math problems, making dinner together, reading bedtime stories, evidence of a father present and engaged, building a case for custody without even trying. That night, after Kristen was asleep, Calvin sat in his bedroom, staring at the space under their bed. Such an innocent place storage for winter blankets and forgotten shoeboxes. Now he couldn't look at it without imagining his daughter hidden there, listening to sounds no child should hear. He got down on his hands and knees, looking at the space from Kristen's perspective. The box spring hung low enough to hide a small body. The dust ruffle would have concealed her completely. She would have been invisible, trapped by her own game while her mother played another one entirely. Calvin's work phone rang his foreman with a problem at the Coronado site. He spent an hour troubleshooting foundation issues, grateful for problems with clear solutions. Rebar and concrete followed rules. They didn't lie or betray or pretend love while planning abandonment. By the time he hung up, it was past midnight. Patricia would be home in 18 hours. He had that long to decide his next move, to fortify his position. Calvin pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Asset lists, timeline of Patricia's suspicious behavior, names of witnesses who'd seen her with Miles, the Tanoan property information, bank accounts he'd discovered, everything Samantha Chen would need to protect his interests, and more importantly, Kristen's. At the bottom of the page, he wrote, Hide and seek ends now. Because Calvin Mitchell was done being the one who didn't know he was playing, done being the trusting husband, the stable provider, the man too naive to see what was happening in his own home. The builder in him recognized when it was time to stop repairing and start demolishing. And Patricia was about to learn that the most dangerous player in any game was the one who'd been underestimated. Calvin looked at his wedding ring one more time, then pulled it off and set it on the nightstand. Tomorrow he'd put it back on, play the devoted husband one more day. But tonight, in the darkness of the bedroom where his daughter had hidden under the bed, Calvin Mitchell began planning how to bring his wife's house of cards crashing down. The game was changing, and this time, he knew all the rules. Monday morning brought Patricia home with her usual whirlwind energy, dropping bags in the foyer while scrolling through her phone. Calvin watched from the kitchen, noting the designer shopping bags mixed with her luggage purchases from a business trip to Dallas that never happened. Traffic was murder, she said, pecking his cheek. I need to shower and get to the office. Miles wants a debrief on the Dallas meetings. How did they go? Calvin poured coffee, keeping his voice neutral. Exhausting but productive. The Riverside people are demanding, but I think we closed the deal. She was already heading upstairs, lies flowing like water. After she left for work, Calvin drove to Jerry's law office in downtown Albuquerque. The building reflected Jerry's success, all glass and steel against the desert sky. His secretary waved Calvin through to the corner office where Jerry waited with a woman who could only be Samantha Chen. She was younger than Calvin expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her handshake was firm, her smile calculated to reassure without promising anything. Mr. Mitchell, Jerry's filled me in on the basics. Before we proceed, I need complete honesty. Divorce proceedings get ugly, especially with infidelity and hidden assets involved. Calvin sat across from her, feeling like he was stepping off a cliff. I want to protect my daughter. Everything else is secondary. Good. That's the right priority. Samantha opened a leather portfolio. Based on what Jerry's told me, we need to move carefully. Your wife sounds sophisticated enough to have covered her tracks. She thinks I'm too trusting to look. Her mistake. Now, Jerry mentioned a three-pronged approach. Jerry leaned forward, his courtroom presence filling the room. Asset protection first. I've already drawn up papers for a trust that'll shelter Calvin's business interests. Completely legal, but it'll take Patricia's lawyers months to untangle if she tries to grab everything. Smart. Samantha made notes. What about documentation of the affair? Working on it, Calvin said. I've got an investigator tracking her movements, but I need more. Something undeniable. Which brings us to prong 2, Jerry said. The Tanoan condo. We need eyes inside. Calvin shifted uncomfortably. Breaking and entering isn't... Who said anything about breaking? Jerry smiled. You're a contractor. That building uses Prometheus security systems. Same company that did my office. I happen to know they're upgrading their cameras this month. You want me to pose as a security installer? I want you to be a security installer. My guy can get you on the approved vendor list. Completely legitimate site visit to assess their system. If you happen to leave behind some upgrades. Samantha held up a hand. I'm not hearing this. Hearing what? Jerry's grin widened. We're just discussing home security options. They spent another hour strategizing. Samantha explained New Mexico's community property laws, how Patricia's hidden assets could actually work in Calvin's favor if properly documented. The prenup Jerry mentioned turned out to be a masterstroke buried in their original marriage documents, was a fidelity clause Patricia had probably forgotten about. She pushed for it, Calvin remembered, said it would protect both of us. Ironic. Samantha pulled up the document on her tablet. If we can prove infidelity, she forfeits claim to any assets acquired during the marriage. That includes your business. What about custody? That's trickier. Courts favor joint custody unless we can prove she's an unfit parent. The affair alone won't do it. Samantha paused. But financial fraud, exposing the child to inappropriate situations, creating an unstable home environment. Calvin thought of Kristen under the bed. She's already done that. Then we document everything, every incident, every conversation. Your daughter's statements could be crucial, but we have to be careful. Children can't be coached or manipulated. I won't use her as a weapon. Good, but her truth might be your strongest defense. As Calvin prepared to leave, Samantha dropped one more bombshell. Jerry mentioned your wife might be pregnant. What? Jerry looked apologetic. Tom Watson noticed she's been to an OB-GYN twice this month. Could be routine, but... Calvin sank back into his chair. Patricia pregnant. The timing was too convenient, too cruel. If she is, we'll need paternity tests, Samantha said quietly. I know it's painful, but if the child isn't yours, it significantly impacts support obligations. Calvin drove home in a daze. Patricia potentially pregnant with another man's child while sleeping in their bed, wearing the rings he'd given her, playing mother to Kristen. The betrayal kept finding new depths. That afternoon, he met Tom Watson at a coffee shop in Old Town. The investigator looked like an accountant forgettable face, cheap suit, the kind of man who could disappear in any crowd. Your wife's careful, Tom said, sliding a folder across the table, but not careful enough. She's been using a credit card you don't know about, registered to P. Montgomery. P. Montgomery? Patricia Montgomery. Looks like she's been testing out her new name. Tom flipped through photos. These are from the past week. Her car at the El Dorado, at the Tanoan address, at a jewelry store in Scottsdale Plaza. One photo showed Patricia leaving the jewelry store, removing something from her neck and placing it in a box. Calvin zoomed in. The necklace. She was replacing his gift with something else. There's more. Tom pulled out another set of images. Miles Montgomery has a wife, Eleanor, old oil money family. She's the real power behind his company. Does she know? Hard to say. They live separate lives mostly. But if she found out... Tom let the implication hang. Calvin studied the photos of Eleanor Montgomery. Elegant, cold, the kind of woman who'd destroy anyone who threatened her position. Another piece on the board. Keep digging, Calvin said, especially into Miles's business dealings. Jerry thinks there might be financial irregularities. Guys like him always have dirt, just gotta know where to look. That evening, Calvin played the devoted husband and father. He helped Kristen with homework, made Patricia's favorite dinner, asked about her day with practiced interest. Patricia seemed relaxed, confident her secret remained safe. She even wore a new necklace, delicate gold with a diamond pendant. That's pretty, Calvin noted. New? This? No, I've had it forever. Found it cleaning out my jewelry box. She touched it self-consciously, the lie smooth as silk. After Patricia went to bed, Calvin sat in his office, studying the trust documents Jerry had prepared. With a few signatures, he could protect his assets, ensure Kristen's future regardless of what came next. It felt like donning armor before battle. His phone buzzed. A text from Jerry. Security company approved your vendor status. Site visit Thursday, 2 p.m. Condo 12B. Calvin deleted the message and pulled up the building plans for Tanoan Country Club. He'd built in that neighborhood, knew the layouts, the sight lines, the security protocols. By Thursday, he'd be ready to install more than just cameras. The war was escalating, and Patricia didn't even know she was under siege, but Calvin was patient. He'd built his business one brick at a time, and he'd dismantle his marriage the same way, methodically, thoroughly, until nothing remained but truth. Thursday arrived with storm clouds gathering over the Sandias, unusual for the season. Calvin loaded his contractor's van with legitimate security equipment, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. He'd done 100 site visits, but never one with stakes this high. Patricia had left early for a breakfast meeting with Miles. She didn't even bother varying her excuses anymore. Calvin dropped Kristen at school, noticing how his daughter clung a little longer during their goodbye hug. You okay, sweetheart? I had a weird dream. You and Mommy were playing hide and seek, but you couldn't find each other. Calvin's chest tightened. It was just a dream. I'll always find you, no matter what. The Tanoan Country Club guard barely glanced at Calvin's credentials before waving him through. Contractors were invisible in places like this, part of the scenery that kept luxury running smoothly. He parked outside Building 12 and unloaded his equipment, every movement calculated to look routine. The condo lobby was all marble and desert elegance. Calvin checked in with the building manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Dolores who scrutinized his work order. Mr. Montgomery requested this personally? Upgrading the entire building system, Calvin confirmed. Starting with the penthouse units. 12B is first on the list. She handed him a master key card. Try not to disturb the residents. Mr. Montgomery values his privacy. Calvin rode the elevator to the 12th floor, his toolbox heavy with more than just security equipment. The hallway was empty, silent except for the hum of climate control. He stood before 12B, Patricia's secret kingdom, and slid the key card. The door opened to reveal everything his wife thought he was too stupid to discover. The condo was spectacular floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, designer furniture, art that cost more than most people's cars. But it was the personal touches that made Calvin's hands clench. Photos of Patricia and Miles on various trips, her clothes in the bedroom closet, a wine rack filled with bottles from vineyards they'd visited, a life completely separate from the one she pretended to live with him. Calvin forced himself to focus. He had 40 minutes before the building manager might check on him. He moved methodically, installing tiny cameras in smoke detectors, air vents behind picture frames, each one connected to a secure server Tom Watson had set up, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. In the bedroom, he found more evidence of Patricia's double life. Lingerie he'd never seen, men's clothes that weren't his size, and on the nightstand, a framed photo of Patricia wearing the new necklace, Miles's arms around her from behind. Calvin photographed everything with a specialized camera that would timestamp and geocode each image. Legal evidence, Samantha had called it. Undeniable proof. He was installing the last camera when he heard voices in the hallway. His blood froze as he recognized Patricia's laugh, then Miles's deeper tones. They were coming here. Now. Calvin grabbed his tools and slipped into the guest bathroom just as the front door opened. "I can't believe you told Eleanor you were golfing," Patricia said. "She knows you hate golf." "She doesn't care what I do as long as I'm discreet." Miles's voice was closer now, moving toward the bedroom. "Besides, I'd rather spend the afternoon with you than chasing a little white ball." "Flatterer. I have to be back by 3. Calvin thinks I'm showing houses in the North Valley." "Calvin." Miles said the name like it tasted bad. "When are you going to tell him?" "Tell him what? That I'm pregnant? That it's yours? That I want a divorce?" Patricia's voice turned hard. "I need to time this perfectly. Your wife's money is one thing, but I've invested too much in Calvin to walk away empty-handed." Calvin pressed against the bathroom wall, his pulse roaring in his ears. Pregnant. Confirmed. And definitely not his. "The prenup won't hold up if I'm careful. My lawyer says if I can prove emotional abuse, gaslighting, controlling behavior. I just need Calvin to lose his temper once. One recorded incident, and I get everything plus custody of Kristen. And our baby? We'll have the life they deserve, not stuck in some middle-class subdivision with a construction worker playing at businessman." Calvin heard them moving to the bedroom, heard sounds that made him want to punch through the wall. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started recording, catching every word of their post-coital planning. "The Riverside project is perfect," Miles was saying. "We'll leak just enough information to make it look like Calvin's company used substandard materials. His reputation goes down, his business follows, and you're married to a failure who can't provide. No judge will give him custody then." "You're brilliant," Patricia purred. "But won't this trace back to you?" "I've got Wallace at the building department ready to swear he found violations. Cost me 50 grand, but it's worth it to get you free and clear." They talked for another 20 minutes, outlining the destruction of everything Calvin had built, his business, his reputation, his relationship with his daughter. All of it planned like a construction project, with Patricia as the wrecking ball. Finally, they left, Patricia calling out reminders about dinner with her book club tonight. Calvin waited another 10 minutes before emerging from his hiding spot, his shirt soaked with sweat. He finished the camera installation on autopilot, his mind processing what he'd heard. They weren't just planning to divorce him, they were planning to destroy him. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd revealed their plan in the very room he'd just wired for sound and video. Calvin packed up his equipment and left the building, nodding politely to Dolores on his way out. In his van, he called Tom Watson. "The cameras are live," he said, "and I've got audio that'll bury them both. Send it to my secure server. This is exactly what we needed." Next, Calvin called Jerry. "Change of plans. They're going after my business, trying to frame me for construction violations." "Sons of bitches. When?" "Soon. Miles has someone at the building department in his pocket. Guy named Wallace." Jerry's laugh was dark. "Wallace? That drunk who got censured twice last year? This is almost too easy. I'll have my investigator pull his financial records. Guarantee we'll find that 50 grand deposit." Calvin's last call was to Samantha. "Patricia's definitely pregnant, and it's definitely not mine. I've got her on tape admitting it." "Excellent, that voids any claim for spousal support. Can you get DNA samples?" "I'll figure something out." That evening, Calvin played his role perfectly. He listened to Patricia talk about her fictional day showing houses, Complimented her on the dinner she'd picked up from their favorite restaurant, claiming she'd cooked it, even rubbed her feet while they watched TV. "You're sweet tonight," she said, studying him with calculating eyes. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking how lucky I am," Calvin replied. "Beautiful wife, amazing daughter, good business. Man couldn't ask for more." Patricia's smile was poison wrapped in sugar. "We are lucky, aren't we? Though I've been thinking, maybe it's time to expand, take more risks with the business." "What kind of risks?" "Oh, I don't know. Bigger projects like that Riverside development. I could put in a word with Miles, get you a meeting." Calvin felt the trap closing but played along. "That'd be great, honey. I trust your judgment." Later, as Patricia slept beside him, Calvin stared at the ceiling, planning counter-moves. She wanted him to lose his temper? He'd give her the opposite, a husband so devoted, so trusting, that her betrayal would look even worse in court. His phone lit up with a text from Tom. "Camera's working perfectly. You're not going to believe what they did after you left." Calvin didn't want to know, not yet. Tomorrow he'd watch his wife betray him in high definition. Tonight, he needed to hold on to his composure, to remember that revenge was a dish best served with legal documentation and inadmissible evidence. In her sleep, Patricia murmured Miles's name. Calvin smiled in the darkness. Every mistake they made was another nail in their coffin, and he was becoming an expert carpenter. Friday morning arrived with Teresa's crisis, as predictable as sunrise. Calvin was reviewing the damning footage from the condo cameras when his phone rang, showing a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Officer Daniels with APD. We have Teresa Garrett here. She listed you as her emergency contact." Calvin sighed. "What did she do now?" "She's been arrested for writing bad checks at the casino. Bail's set at $10,000. She's asking if you could, I'll be there in an hour." Patricia was already at work another early meeting with Miles, no doubt planning his destruction over lattes. Calvin called Jerry as he drove to the detention center. "Teresa's in jail again," he said, "but I'm thinking this might be an opportunity. You want to use the sister? That's cold, brother. She's been taking money from Patricia for years. Money from that hidden account. She might know things. Or she might warn Patricia you're onto her." Calvin considered this. Teresa was a wild card, loyal only to her next bet. But wild cards could be useful if played right. "I'll feel her out. If she's too risky, I'll pay her bail and send her home." The detention center smelled of desperation and industrial disinfectant. Teresa looked smaller in orange, her usual bravado dimmed by a night in custody. When she saw Calvin, relief flooded her face. "Thank God, I thought I'd have to call Patricia and she's already pissed about last month's loan." Calvin sat across from her in the visiting room. "How much do you owe, Teresa?" "Really? 30 grand, give or take. But I've got a system. Your system got you arrested." Calvin leaned forward. "I'll pay your bail and clear your debts. All of them. But I need something in return." Teresa's eyes sharpened. Addicts knew transactions. "What kind of something?" "Information. About Patricia and Miles." "I don't know what you're—" "The condo in Tanoan. The one they're putting in both their names. The trips Patricia takes when she tells me she's in Dallas. I know, Teresa, I just need details." Teresa slumped in her chair. "Shit. How long have you known?" "Long enough. Help me and I'll help you. Cross me, and you're on your own with some very angry people looking for their money. Patricia will kill me. Patricia's been lying to both of us, using money that should go to Kristen's future to fund her affair. You want to protect her or your niece?" That hit home. Teresa might be a mess, but she loved Kristen. "What do you need?" "Everything. When it started, where they go, what their plans are, and I need you to get me something with Miles's DNA on it." "DNA? Why would understanding dawned?" "Oh, fuck. She's pregnant?" "Not with my child." Teresa whistled low. "That's why she's been weird lately. Mood swings, throwing up. I thought it was stress." She met Calvin's eyes. "She's planning to leave you. Has been for months. Miles promised her the world, his wife's money, the company, everything." "When?" "Soon." "She mentioned something about waiting for some big deal to go through first. Something about your business?" Calvin's jaw tightened. I need you to get invited to the condo. This weekend, if possible. Can you do that? I guess. Patricia likes showing off the place. Makes her feel superior. Good. I'll give you something to put in the drinks. Harmless. Just makes people sleepy. When they pass out, you collect what I need. Teresa looked uncomfortable. That's pretty dark, Calvin. So is stealing from your husband and planning to take his daughter away. You in or out? In, but I want rehab too. Real rehab, not the county bullshit. Done. Calvin posted bail and drove Teresa to her apartment, a sad complex near the airport. She disappeared inside and came back with a shoebox. Here, she said, thrusting it at him. Figured you might want these. Inside were photos, receipts, even a love letter from Miles to Patricia dated 6 months ago. Evidence Teresa had been collecting, probably for blackmail. Why? Calvin asked. Insurance. Addicts always need insurance. Teresa looked away. And maybe because I was tired of watching her treat you like shit. You're a good guy, Calvin. Better than she deserves. That afternoon, Calvin met with his foreman, Danny, to shore up defenses for his business. They went through every project with a fine-tooth comb, documenting materials, inspections, sign-offs. Someone's gunning for us? Danny asked. Maybe. Just being careful. Boss, I've been in this business 30 years. I know when someone's preparing for war. What do you need? Calvin looked at this man who'd helped build his company from nothing. Keep your ears open at the building department. Anyone starts asking questions about our projects, I want to know immediately. Wallace been sniffing around, Danny said. That drunk bastard couldn't find a violation if it bit him, but he's been asking about the Coronado project. Calvin filed that away. Miles was moving faster than expected. That evening, Patricia came home glowing with false affection. She'd brought Chinese food from the place Calvin loved, that she usually complained was too greasy. Thought we could have a nice family dinner, she said, setting out containers. Like old times. Kristen chattered through dinner about school, oblivious to the undercurrents. Patricia kept touching Calvin's hand, laughing at his jokes, playing the devoted wife to perfection. After Kristen went to bed, Patricia poured wine and curled up next to Calvin on the couch. I've been thinking, she said. Maybe we should take a vacation. Just the three of us. Reconnect. That sounds nice. Where were you thinking? Somewhere tropical. Miles mentioned his company has a corporate rate at this resort in Cabo. Of course, Miles was involved. Even in her fake attempts at reconciliation, Patricia couldn't help but reveal her obsession. Sounds expensive, Calvin said mildly. We can afford it. Besides, life's too short not to enjoy ourselves. She kissed his cheek, her perfume different than usual. I'm going to shower. Don't fall asleep on me. Calvin knew what she was doing. The sudden affection, the family vacation talk, she was establishing a pattern for the lawyers. See how hard I tried? See how I wanted to save our marriage? All while carrying another man's child and plotting his destruction. His phone buzzed. Teresa. Invited to condo tomorrow afternoon. Patricia wants to show me the new hot tub. Miles will be there. Calvin typed back. Perfect. Come by my office in the morning. I'll have everything ready. He went upstairs to find Patricia in their bed, wearing the La Perla lingerie he'd found in her car weeks ago. She smiled at him, predatory and false. I've missed us, she said. Haven't you? Calvin looked at his wife, really looked at her, saw the calculation behind her eyes, the performance in every gesture. This woman who'd promised to love him forever was now acting out a script designed to destroy him. I've missed us too, he lied, pulling her close. More than you know. Later, as Patricia slept, Calvin lay awake planning. Tomorrow, Teresa would get the DNA evidence. Next week, the cameras would capture enough footage to bury both Patricia and Miles. And somewhere in between, he'd protect his business from their sabotage and ensure Kristen never had to hide under a bed again. The chess pieces were all in motion now. Patricia thought she was playing checkers while Calvin had graduated to three-dimensional chess. Every move she made, every lie she told, only strengthened his position. His phone lit up with another text from Tom Watson. Got something interesting on Miles. His wife Eleanor just hired a forensic accountant. Seems she's noticed some irregularities in their finances. Calvin smiled in the darkness. Eleanor Montgomery was about to become an unwitting ally. Because when you're building a web to catch spiders, sometimes other predators get tangled too. And Calvin was patient enough to wait for them all to struggle themselves into tighter knots. Saturday dawned clear and bright, the kind of New Mexico morning that made people forget the desert could be cruel. Calvin was in his office by 7, preparing Teresa's supplies with the methodical precision of a bomb maker. The sedative was mild. Tom Watson had sourced it from a connection who specialized in divorces gone nuclear. Just enough to make someone drowsy and compliant, not enough to cause lasting harm. Calvin measured doses into small vials, each labeled with instructions in his neat contractor's handwriting. Teresa arrived looking nervous but determined, wearing her best outfit, the one she saved for court appearances and job interviews that never went anywhere. "You sure about this?" she asked, pocketing the vials. "Just get the DNA samples. Hair from their brushes, glasses they've used, anything with saliva or skin cells. And if they don't pass out, then you improvise. You're good at that." Teresa managed a weak smile. 30 years of fucking up does teach some skills. Calvin handed her an envelope, $5,000 in cash. "For incidentals. And Teresa, after this, you're going straight to rehab. No excuses." Yeah. Save the lectures for Patricia." After she left, Calvin tried to focus on paperwork, but concentration was impossible. Everything hinged on today Teresa's mission, the evidence gathering, the chess pieces all converging. He found himself checking the condo camera feeds obsessively, waiting. At noon, his phone rang. Danny, his foreman. "Boss, we got a problem. Wallace just showed up at the Coronado site with 2 other inspectors. They're going through everything: permits, materials receipts, concrete samples." Calvin's blood chilled. "On a Saturday?" "Said they got an anonymous tip about substandard rebar. It's bullshit, but they're making a show of it. Document everything. Video if you can. And call Jerry Rodriguez, tell him we need witnesses there now." Calvin raced to the construction site, his mind calculating damage control. The Coronado project was his biggest current job, a medical complex that would establish his company in the commercial sector. Losing it would be catastrophic. He found Wallace holding court near the foundation, his bloated face red with self-importance. The other inspectors looked uncomfortable, probably wondering why they'd been dragged out on a weekend. "Mr. Mitchell," Wallace said with false concern, "we've had reports of construction deficiencies, very serious allegations." "From who?" Calvin kept his voice level, though rage simmered beneath. "Anonymous source, but credible enough to warrant immediate inspection." Calvin watched Wallace's performance, noting the sweat on his brow despite the cool morning, the way his hands shook slightly. The man was nervous, guilty. "Inspect away," Calvin said. "We've got nothing to hide. Danny, give them full access to all documentation." For 2 hours they crawled over the site while Calvin's crew stood by, their weekend ruined. Jerry arrived with a court reporter, turning the inspection into an official proceeding that made Wallace visibly uncomfortable. Finally, one of the other inspectors approached Calvin. "Everything looks good to me. Better than code, actually. I don't know what Wallace is looking for." $50,000 worth of problems," Calvin said quietly. The inspector's eyes widened. "You saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying someone paid him to find violations that don't exist. Someone with a vested interest in seeing my company fail." The inspector glanced at Wallace, who was now arguing with Jerry about jurisdiction. "You got proof? Working on it. Well, work faster. Wallace has friends at City Hall. This won't be his last visit." As the inspectors finally left, finding nothing but forced to take samples for testing, Calvin's phone buzzed. "Teresa. At the condo. They're drinking champagne. Patricia's bragging about the baby." Calvin's jaw clenched. His wife was celebrating her pregnancy with her lover while trying to destroy his livelihood. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Jerry approached, loosening his tie. That was orchestrated. Wallace practically had a script. "Miles is moving faster than we thought. He wants me ruined before Patricia files for divorce. Then we move faster. I've got a friend at the Attorney General's office. If Wallace took a bribe, that's corruption. Criminal charges that'll make anything in divorce court look tame." Calvin nodded. but his mind was on the condo, on Teresa playing her part in their twisted drama. He pulled up the camera feed on his phone, watching Patricia and Miles toast their future while his sister-in-law smiled and plotted. By 4 o'clock, Calvin was back in his office when Teresa called. "It's done. They're both passed out. I've got hair samples, saliva swabs from their glasses, even managed to grab a toothbrush." "Good. Get out of there." "Already gone. Calvin. I heard some shit while they were drinking. They're planning something big for next week." "Something about a newspaper story?" Calvin's stomach dropped. A public accusation of construction fraud would destroy him even if proven false. Reputation was everything in his business. "What else?" "Patricia was laughing about how she's been documenting your controlling behavior for months, making recordings when you ask where she's been, keeping a journal about feeling trapped. It's all bullshit, but it'll play well in court." Calvin finished. "Thanks, Teresa. Drop the samples at Tom Watson's office. The address is in your phone." That evening, Calvin sat at his kitchen table, the house quiet with Kristen at a sleepover. Patricia was still at the condo. The cameras showed her and Miles in the hot tub, champagne glasses refilled, planning his destruction between kisses. His phone rang. Tom Watson. "Got the samples. DNA test will take a few days, but I've got something else. Remember Eleanor Montgomery? She didn't just hire a forensic accountant. She hired a whole team. Apparently Miles has been siphoning money from their joint accounts for months. Let me guess, right around the time he started seeing Patricia." "Bingo. Eleanor's building a case. Divorce is imminent." Calvin processed this. If Eleanor divorced Miles, his resources would be cut dramatically. Patricia was planning a future with a man whose empire was about to crumble. "Can we reach out to Eleanor?" Calvin asked. "Risky, but might be worth it. Enemy of my enemy and all that. Set it up." Discreetly, Calvin hung up and went to his safe, pulling out documents he'd been assembling. Bank records showing Patricia's hidden accounts. Receipts for jewelry she'd claimed was old but had bought with marital funds. The business registration for PMMM Tanoan Investment LLC, fraudulently using community property. And now, soon, DNA evidence that the child she carried wasn't his. The final piece came via email from Jerry. "Wallace deposited $50,000 cash yesterday. Source unknown, but timing is suspicious. My guy at the AG is very interested." Calvin printed everything, organizing it into neat folders. Evidence of adultery, financial fraud, conspiracy to commit defamation, corruption of public officials. What had started as simple infidelity had metastasized into something far darker. His phone showed Patricia finally leaving the condo, kissing Miles goodbye in the parking garage. She'd be home in 20 minutes, playing the loving wife again, unaware that her every move was documented, every lie recorded. Calvin put away the folders and poured himself a scotch. The explosion was coming. He could feel it building like pressure in a fault line. Patricia and Miles had planted dynamite under his life, but they'd forgotten something crucial. Calvin was a builder. He understood controlled demolitions. And when the dust settled, he'd make sure he and Kristen were the only ones left standing in the rubble. His phone buzzed one last time. A text from Teresa. "In rehab tomorrow. Thanks for believing in me. P.S. Patricia's scared of you finding out. She should be." Calvin raised his glass to the empty kitchen. The steel web was complete, every strand carefully placed. Now, all he had to do was wait for his prey to struggle. And struggle they would, right up until the moment they realized the spider had been watching all along. The Albuquerque Museum of Art and History stood like a monument to culture against the desert backdrop, its Pueblo Revival architecture gleaming under strategically placed lights. Calvin adjusted his tie in the reflection of his truck window, the invitation to his company's 10th anniversary celebration heavy in his pocket. 3 weeks had passed since the DNA results confirmed what he already knew: Patricia carried Miles Montgomery's child. 3 weeks of playing the devoted husband while orchestrating the most important performance of his life. "You look handsome, Daddy," Kristen said from the back seat, wearing her favorite purple dress. "Thanks, baby. You ready to see Daddy's big party?" "Will Mommy be there?" Calvin's jaw tightened. Patricia had been packing for days, thinking he didn't notice. She'd grown careless in her confidence, leaving bank statements out, taking calls from miles in the next room. Tonight, she planned to make her escape during the celebration, using the crowd as cover. She had no idea Teresa was waiting in the parking garage. "She'll be there," Calvin said, helping Kristen from the truck. "Everyone will be there." The museum's main hall had been transformed into a showcase of Mitchell Construction's decade of work. Photos of completed projects lined the walls, from the first residential renovation to the Coronado Medical Complex. Calvin had insisted on the museum venue public, prestigious, and equipped with an excellent audio-visual system. Jerry met them at the entrance, resplendent in his best suit. "The packages are in place," he murmured. "Samantha's here with the documents. Tom has the remotes. And our special guests? Eleanor Montgomery just arrived. Alone. She's very interested in meeting Patricia." Jerry's smile was sharp. "The gentlemen from the Attorney General's office are at the bar, enjoying the free drinks." Calvin nodded, scanning the growing crowd. His employees, their families, business associates, competitors, everyone who mattered in Albuquerque's construction industry. And there, holding court near the architectural models, stood Miles Montgomery. The man looked confident, prosperous, every inch the successful CEO. He caught Calvin's eye and raised his champagne glass in a mocking toast. The arrogance of it made Calvin's blood burn cold. "Calvin, wonderful party." Bob Martin from the neighborhood appeared with his wife Linda. "Patricia must be so proud." "Speaking of Patricia," Linda said, looking around, "where is she? I haven't seen her in ages." "She'll be here soon," Calvin lied smoothly. "Probably fussing with her outfit. You know how she is about appearances." The Martins laughed and moved on, leaving Calvin to continue his reconnaissance. He spotted Wallace near the dessert table, sweating despite the air conditioning. The corrupt inspector had been suspended pending investigation, but Calvin had made sure he received an invitation. Every player needed to be present for the final act. "Mr. Mitchell?" A cool voice made him turn. Eleanor Montgomery stood before him, tall and regal in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "Mrs. Montgomery." Calvin shook her manicured hand. "Thank you for coming. I wouldn't miss it. I understand you've had some interesting experiences with my husband's company recently." Her eyes were Arctic blue, sharp with intelligence and barely contained rage. Calvin recognized a fellow traveler in the landscape of Betrayal. "Business is always interesting," he said carefully. "Indeed. Perhaps we could discuss mutual interests later. I believe we have more in common than construction projects." She glanced meaningfully at Miles, who was now deep in conversation with several city officials. "Enjoy your celebration, Mr. Mitchell. I have a feeling it will be memorable." Eleanor glided away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and implied threats. Calvin checked his watch 8:15. The presentation was scheduled for 9, 45 minutes until detonation. His phone buzzed. "Teresa, package intercepted. She's not happy." Calvin typed back, "Hold position. Wait for my signal." "Daddy, I'm hungry." Kristen tugged at his jacket. "Let's get you some food, sweetheart." They were heading to the buffet when Patricia finally appeared, and Calvin's breath caught despite everything. She'd chosen a red dress that clung to her still slim figure, her hair swept up to showcase the diamond necklace Miles had bought her. She looked beautiful, triumphant, every inch the woman about to start a new life. Their eyes met across the room. Patricia's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered, gliding toward them with practiced grace. "There are my two favorite people," she said, kissing Kristen's head while avoiding Calvin's lips. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." "You look beautiful," Calvin said truthfully. "That's a new dress? This old thing?" The lie came so easily. "I've had it forever." Calvin saw the calculation in her eyes, the way she kept glancing toward the exits. Her purse was larger than usual documents, he guessed. Passport, bank information, everything she needed to disappear. "Patricia, you look stunning." Linda Martin appeared with perfect timing. "That necklace is gorgeous. Is it new?" Patricia's hand flew to her throat. "Anniversary gift," she said quickly. "Calvin's so thoughtful." Calvin smiled, playing along. 15 years deserve something special." Linda gushed appropriately, while Patricia's face cycled through emotions: surprise, calculation, false affection. She hadn't expected him to cover for her. It didn't fit her narrative of the controlling, suspicious husband. "If you'll excuse me," Patricia said, "I need to powder my nose." She walked toward the restrooms, but Calvin saw her duck into the administrative wing instead, checking her escape route. She'd find Teresa there, blocking her path with apologies and desperate explanations about rehab and making amends. "Ladies and gentlemen," the museum director tapped the microphone. "If you could start making your way to the main presentation hall, we'll begin shortly." The crowd began migrating toward the auditorium. Calvin guided Kristen to their reserved seats in the front row, Jerry and Samantha flanking them. Behind them, the room filled with Albuquerque's construction elite, city officials, and media representatives Jerry had personally invited. Miles took a seat across the aisle, checking his phone repeatedly. Looking for Patricia, no doubt. She should have met him by now, should be in his car heading for the airport. Calvin saw the first crack in his confident facade. Tom Watson slipped in beside Calvin, pressing something into his hand, a small remote control with a single button. "Everything's queued up," he whispered. "Just say when." The museum director returned to the podium. "Tonight, we celebrate not just a company, but a vision. Mitchell Construction has helped build the Albuquerque we see today. Please welcome the man behind that vision, Calvin Mitchell." Calvin stood to warm applause, kissing Kristen's head before taking the stage. The lights were bright, but he could see every face in the audience, including Patricia, who'd just entered through a side door, her face flushed and angry. Teresa must have done her job well. "Thank you all for coming," Calvin began, his voice steady despite the hurricane in his chest. 10 years ago, I started this company with nothing but a truck and a dream. Tonight, I want to share the story of how we built something together." He clicked the remote, and the screen behind him came to life with images of construction projects, employee celebrations, community service initiatives. The audience smiled and nodded, expecting a typical corporate retrospective. "But success in business," Calvin continued, "means nothing without integrity, without trust, without the foundation of truth that holds everything together." The images on screen began to change. Financial documents, bank statements, the business registration for PMMM Tanoan Investment LLC. Miles shot to his feet. "What the hell is this?" "This," Calvin said calmly, "is transparency." The next slide showed surveillance footage from the Tanoan condo. Miles and Patricia entering together, embracing in the doorway. The timestamp clear and damning. The audience erupted in whispers. Patricia's face had gone white, her hands gripping her purse like a lifeline. "For months," Calvin continued over the noise, "certain individuals have conspired to destroy not just my business, but the livelihoods of everyone who works for Mitchell Construction." More slides. The recorded conversation about framing Calvin for construction violations. Wallace's bank records showing the $50,000 deposit. Email chains between Miles and Patricia planning their future with stolen money. "Turn it off!" Miles stormed toward the stage. "This is illegal! This is all legally obtained evidence." Jerry stood up, his courtroom voice carrying, "and already in the hands of the Attorney General's office." That's when the men in dark suits moved in from the back of the room, FBI badges gleaming, faces professionally neutral. The audience gasped as they surrounded Miles. "Miles Montgomery, you're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and bribery of a public official." "This is entrapment," Miles struggled as they cuffed him. "Calvin, you bastard, you set me up." "No," Calvin said quietly. "You set yourself up. I just documented it." Patricia tried to run then, but found her path blocked by Eleanor Montgomery. "Going somewhere, dear?" Eleanor's smile was pure venom. "I don't think so. We have so much to discuss about the money you helped steal from my accounts." The screen behind Calvin changed one more time. The DNA test results, clinical and undeniable, showing that the child Patricia carried belonged to the man being dragged away in handcuffs. Patricia's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, her perfect facade finally cracking. "Calvin, please, I can explain." "No," Calvin said, stepping down from the stage. "No more explanations. No more lies. Samantha?" His lawyer stepped forward with a manila envelope. Patricia Mitchell, you're being served with divorce papers. Due to the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause, you forfeit all claim to marital assets. Additionally, given the evidence of financial fraud and child endangerment, Mr. Mitchell will be seeking sole custody of Kristen. You can't! Patricia's voice broke. She's my daughter. You should have thought of that, Calvin said quietly, before you brought your affair into our home. Before you let our 80-year-old daughter hide under the bed while you daddy? Kristen's small voice cut through everything. Why is Mommy crying? Calvin knelt beside his daughter, his heart breaking. Sometimes adults make mistakes, baby. Big ones. But no matter what happens, I love you and I'll always take care of you. Will Mommy still live with us? No, sweetheart. But you'll still see her. Just differently. The rest happened in a blur. Miles dragged away by federal agents. Patricia escorted out by Eleanor's lawyers. Wallace trying to slip away only to be caught by more agents. The audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing the complete destruction of lives built on deception. When the chaos finally settled, Calvin found himself back on stage, microphone in hand, looking at the shocked faces of his employees and associates. I apologize for the drama, he said, but Mitchell Construction was built on honesty, and it will continue that way. Those who tried to destroy us through lies and corruption have failed. We're still standing. We're still building. And we'll keep building one honest brick at a time. The applause started slowly, led by Danny Chavez and the construction crews. Then it spread, filling the auditorium with support for a man who'd refused to be destroyed. Calvin left the stage and gathered Kristen in his arms. She was all that mattered now. Everything else, the company, the house, the money, was just construction material. But his daughter was the foundation, and he'd protect that with everything he had. The aftermath of the museum revelation rippled through Albuquerque like an earthquake aftershock. Calvin sat in his lawyer's office the next morning, Kristen coloring quietly beside him while Samantha Chen laid out the new reality. Patricia's attorney called at dawn, Samantha said, sliding documents across the polished table. She's desperate, offering to sign whatever we want in exchange for supervised visitation and a modest settlement. How modest? $50,000. Enough to rent an apartment and start over. Samantha's expression was neutral, professional. Given that she could be charged as an accessory to Miles's embezzlement, it's generous. Calvin looked at his daughter, absorbed in drawing another family portrait. This one only had 2 figures under the sun. She's still Kristen's mother, he said finally. Supervised visitation, yes. The $50,000. From her hidden account, not community property, and she completes parenting classes. You're kinder than most would be. I'm not kind. I'm practical. A desperate Patricia is a dangerous Patricia. Give her enough rope to hang herself or pull herself up. Her choice. Jerry burst through the door, tie askew, face flushed with excitement. You beautiful bastard. Do you know what you've done? Language, Calvin warned, nodding at Kristen. Sorry, but Calvin, the dominoes are falling fast. Wallace flipped on 3 other inspectors who were taking bribes. The FBI found 2 more sets of books at Montgomery Development. And Eleanor? Jerry's grin widened. Eleanor Montgomery just offered to buy Miles's share of the company for pennies on the dollar. She wants to hire Mitchell Construction for all future projects. Calvin felt no triumph, just exhaustion. Tell her we'll consider it, after the dust settles. There's more. That newspaper expose about your supposed construction violations? The editor killed it after seeing the evidence. Instead, they're running a story about corruption in city development. You're mentioned as the whistleblower who brought it all down. Daddy, who's a whistleblower? Kristen looked up from her coloring. Someone who tells the truth when others want to hide it, Calvin explained. Like when I told you about Mommy and Mr. Miles playing hide and seek? The room went silent. Calvin knelt beside his daughter. Yes, baby, exactly like that, and I'm proud of you for telling the truth. Samantha cleared her throat. There's one more thing. Teresa called. She wants to thank you in person. She's 30 days clean. Calvin nodded. Teresa had played her part perfectly, but more importantly, she'd used the crisis to finally get help. Maybe something good could come from all this wreckage. That afternoon, Calvin stood in the empty Tanoan condo. The furniture remained, but the personal touches were gone: photos, clothes, the wine collection. Crime scene tape still decorated the door, but Tom Watson had gotten him permission to retrieve the surveillance equipment. "Quite a show the other night," a voice said from the doorway. Eleanor Montgomery entered, elegant as ever in a business suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She surveyed the space with a critical eye. "My husband had such pedestrian taste," she mused. "All flash, no substance, rather like his choice in mistresses." Calvin remained silent, unsure of this woman's agenda. "I owe you a debt, Mr. Mitchell. You exposed what I suspected but couldn't prove. Miles had been bleeding our accounts for years, funding this." She gestured dismissively. "Suburban fantasy. I wasn't trying to help you." "Of course not. You were saving yourself. But in doing so, you gave me the ammunition I needed." Eleanor smiled, sharp and predatory. "I'm getting everything in the divorce. The company, the assets, even this tacky condo, which brings me to my proposition." She pulled out a checkbook, writing with quick, decisive strokes. "Market value for this place. I'm selling it to you." Calvin stared at the check. $2 million. "I don't want it." "Of course you don't, but think of it as justice. Patricia wanted this place so badly she destroyed her family for it. Now you can decide its fate. Sell it, burn it, turn it into a shrine to failed marriages. I don't care. I just want it off my books." She pressed the check into his hand. "Besides, your daughter deserves a college fund that isn't tainted by her mother's choices." After Eleanor left, Calvin stood on the balcony where his wife had planned his destruction. The city spread below, buildings he'd helped construct dotting the landscape. His phone rang Patricia's ringtone. He'd have to change that. "Calvin!" Her voice was small, broken. "Can we talk? Through lawyers. Please, just 5 minutes." "I'm at the house." Calvin considered. Kristen was safe with Jerry's family for the afternoon. Maybe closure required one last conversation. He found Patricia in their kitchen, surrounded by boxes. She looked smaller somehow, the confident marketing executive replaced by a woman facing the consequences of her choices. The diamond necklace was gone, replaced by the simple chain he'd given her years ago. "I wore this to remind myself," she said, touching the necklace, "of when things were simpler, when I was better." "When did it change, Patricia? When did I become not enough?" She laughed bitterly. "You were always enough. That was the problem. Steady, reliable Calvin. Good father, good provider, good man. Do you know how suffocating perfection can be?" "So you chose chaos instead." "I chose excitement, danger. Miles made me feel young, desired, important." She met his eyes. "And now I've lost everything for a man who's going to federal prison." Calvin said nothing. What was there to say? "I'm pregnant with his child," Patricia continued, "carrying the baby of a criminal while my daughter draws pictures without me in them. How's that for karma?" "What will you do?" "Leave Albuquerque. My cousin in Phoenix offered me a job. Start over where nobody knows my shame." She pulled out an envelope. "I wrote Kristen a letter, for when she's older, when she can maybe understand and forgive." Calvin took the envelope. "I'll keep it safe." "That's what you do, isn't it? Keep things safe? Build things to last." Patricia's tears came freely now. "I'm sorry, Calvin, for all of it, but especially for what I said in that hotel room. You're not a construction worker with pretensions. You're the most genuinely good man I've ever known, and I threw you away for fool's gold." She left that afternoon, taking only what fit in her Lexus. Calvin watched from the window as she drove away, 15 years of marriage disappearing around the corner. Kristen's letter sat heavy in his pocket. That evening, Jerry arrived with pizza and beer, finding Calvin in the backyard staring at the sunset. "How you holding up, brother?" "I'm free," Calvin said simply. "Broken, angry, relieved, scared, but free. And rich, apparently. Eleanor Montgomery's check cleared. $2 million richer." Calvin had almost forgotten. "I'm thinking of donating it. Set up a fund for families affected by domestic betrayal. Therapy, legal aid, starting over money." "St. Calvin." Jerry clinked his beer against Calvin's. "Though I notice you didn't mention Patricia's visit to Samantha." "How did you—" "Security cameras at your house are still running. Tom mentioned it." Jerry studied his friend. You okay with how it ended? Calvin thought about Patricia's tears, her apology, the letter for Kristen. There's no okay in this situation, just different degrees of survival. Speaking of survival, Samantha asked about you. Professionally, of course. But there was something in how she asked. Jerry, my wife left 6 hours ago. I'm not saying marry her tomorrow. I'm saying good people recognize other good people, when you're ready. They drank in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge over the desert. Tomorrow, Calvin would have to explain to Kristen why Mommy was gone. Tomorrow, he'd have to face employees, clients, a city that now knew his private shame. But tonight, he could just be a man on his back deck, sharing beer with his best friend, free from the suffocating weight of deception. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Teresa. 1 month clean today. Thank you for believing I could be better. Your family saved mine. Calvin smiled, the first genuine smile in months. Maybe that's what survival looked like, not the dramatic destruction of your enemies, but the quiet rebuilding of something better from the ruins. 6 months later, Calvin stood in the courthouse hallway, adjusting Kristen's hair bow while she fidgeted with her new dress. Today was the final custody hearing, the last legal battle in a war that had reshaped their lives. Do I have to see Mommy? Kristen asked, her voice small. Just for a few minutes in the courtroom. Then the judge will decide about visits. Will she cry again? Calvin's heart clenched. The supervised visits had been disasters, Patricia sobbing, Kristen confused and upset, the court-appointed supervisor taking notes that inevitably favored Calvin's position. I don't know, baby, but remember, her tears aren't your fault. Samantha Chen emerged from the courtroom, her expression carefully neutral. She'd become more than just his lawyer over these months, though they both maintained professional boundaries. Kristen had started calling her Miss Sam and drawing her into family pictures. Patricia's here, Samantha said quietly, with new representation. They're pushing for unsupervised visitation. Based on what? She's completed parenting classes, maintained employment, stayed clean of any criminal charges. Her pregnancy is showing now, apparently, she's keeping the baby. Calvin felt the familiar mix of anger and pity. Patricia, 7 months pregnant with Miles Montgomery's child, still fighting for a family she'd destroyed. They entered the courtroom to find Patricia at the defendant's table, her attorney whispering urgently. She looked different, hair shorter, makeup minimal, wearing a conservative dress that couldn't hide her condition. When she saw Kristen, her face crumpled before she caught herself. Judge Martinez, a stern woman who'd overseen the entire case, reviewed the documents before her. I've read the supervisor's reports, the psychological evaluations, and the custody recommendations. Mrs. Mitchell, do you have anything to add? Patricia stood, hands trembling. Your Honor, I know I've made terrible mistakes. I betrayed my family and put my daughter in inappropriate situations. But I'm getting help. I'm in therapy. I have stable employment, and I want to be a mother to Kristen. A real mother, not the selfish person I was. And the child you're carrying? Is innocent of my sins, just as Kristen is. I'm not asking to undo the damage I've caused. I'm asking for the chance to prove I can be better. The judge turned to Calvin. Mr. Mitchell, your response? Calvin stood, feeling the weight of decision. Your Honor, I want Kristen to have a relationship with her mother, but trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Patricia exposed our daughter to adult situations no child should witness. She prioritized her affair over Kristen's well-being. Daddy, Kristen whispered, tugging his sleeve. Tell her about the good stuff, too. Calvin looked down at his daughter, surprised. She nodded encouragingly, wise beyond her years. However, Calvin continued, Kristen has expressed that she misses her mother, and I believe Patricia is trying to change. I propose we continue supervised visits for 6 more months with a review for unsupervised day visits after that. Judge Martinez nodded approvingly. A measured response. Mrs. Mitchell, the court appreciates your efforts at rehabilitation. However, the child's safety and emotional well-being must come first. I'm granting Mr. Mitchell's proposal. Supervised visits will continue with review in 6 months. Patricia sagged but nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. As they left the courtroom, Patricia approached cautiously. "Calvin, could I talk to Kristen? Just for a moment?" Calvin looked at Samantha, who nodded. 2 minutes. Patricia knelt awkwardly, her pregnancy making the movement difficult. "Hi, baby girl." "Hi, Mommy. Is that my brother or sister?" Kristen pointed at Patricia's belly. "Yes, your half-sibling." Patricia's voice caught. Are you being good for Daddy? I'm teaching him to braid hair. He's not very good at it." Patricia laughed through tears. "No, he never was. Kristen, I need you to know something. I love you very much, and I'm sorry I wasn't the mommy you deserved, but I'm trying to be better." "Okay." Kristen considered this. "Maybe when the baby comes, you'll have more practice." The simple forgiveness of a child broke Patricia completely. She sobbed, reaching out but not quite touching her daughter. Calvin stepped forward, ending the moment. "Come on, sweetheart. Ice cream to celebrate?" As they walked away, Calvin heard Patricia's broken "thank you" follow them down the hall. That afternoon, Calvin sat in his office, not at Mitchell Construction, which now ran smoothly under Danny's supervision, but at the Lighthouse Foundation, the nonprofit he'd established with Eleanor Montgomery's money. The space buzzed with activity counselors meeting with clients, lawyers preparing cases, support groups gathering in conference rooms. Knock, knock. Tom Watson appeared in the doorway. "Got those background checks you requested on the new volunteers?" Calvin had retained Tom as head of security for the foundation. The man's skills at uncovering deception proved invaluable in protecting vulnerable families from predators and abusers. "Anything concerning?" "One guy with a sealed juvenile record, but it was 20 years ago. Shoplifting. Otherwise, clean." "Give him a chance. People change." Tom studied him. "Like Patricia. Patricia's changing because she has to. But yeah, people can surprise you." Calvin signed the volunteer approvals. "How's Teresa's group doing?" 12 members now. She's got a gift for reaching addicts, probably because she's been there. Teresa had become one of their most dedicated volunteers, running support groups for family members of addicts. 6 months clean had transformed her from desperate gambler to passionate advocate. A knock interrupted them. Eleanor Montgomery entered, immaculate as always, but with a warmth that had emerged since her divorce. "Calvin, the quarterly board meeting is in 10 minutes. Also, that reporter from the Times wants to interview you about the foundation's impact. Tell them no. This isn't about me." Eleanor smiled. "False modesty doesn't suit you. You took a personal tragedy and built something that's helped dozens of families. Own it." She was right, of course. The Lighthouse Foundation had become a beacon for those navigating the treacherous waters of divorce, custody battles, and family betrayal. They provided free legal aid, counseling, emergency housing, and most importantly, hope. Fine, but the focus stays on the families we help, not my story. Of course. Oh, and Samantha called. She's running late, but she'll make the board meeting. Calvin kept his expression neutral. Samantha had joined the board 2 months ago, bringing her expertise and a network of family law attorneys willing to work pro bono. Their relationship remained professional, though Kristen had started asking when Miss Sam was going to marry Daddy and make our family bigger. The board meeting went smoothly, funding secured for another year, 3 new counselors hired, plans approved for a second location. Calvin found himself actually enjoying the work, using his construction skills to build something less tangible but more important than buildings. After the meeting, Samantha lingered. "Walk you to your car?" They strolled through the parking lot, the evening air cool with approaching winter. "Kristen did well today," Samantha observed. "She's remarkably resilient." "Kids adapt. It's adults who get stuck." "Speaking of which," Samantha stopped by her car. "My professional relationship with your case officially ended with today's hearing. I'm no longer your lawyer." Calvin's pulse quickened. "Meaning if you asked me to dinner, it wouldn't be an ethical violation." He looked at this woman who'd guided him through the worst period of his life with grace and competence, who made Kristen laugh and challenged Calvin to be better, who understood that some wounds took time to heal. "Samantha Chen, would you like to have dinner with me? Fair warning, I come with baggage. An 8-year-old daughter, an ex-wife pregnant with another man's child, and a tendency to turn personal disasters into non-profit organizations. She smiled, the professional mask finally dropping completely. I've handled worse. Plus, Kristen already told me you're learning to braid hair. How can I resist a man with such skills? They made plans for Saturday, somewhere Kristen-friendly, because Calvin wasn't ready for adult time that excluded his daughter. As Samantha drove away, Calvin felt something he hadn't experienced in over a year, anticipation for the future. His phone buzzed, a text from Miles Montgomery sent from federal prison. Heard about your foundation. Using my wife's money to play hero? You destroyed my life. Calvin deleted the message without responding. Miles had destroyed his own life. Calvin had just documented it. The man would serve 5 years minimum. His empire dissolved. His reputation in ruins. Patricia's grand protector reduced to a number in the federal system. Another text, this one from Teresa. Group tonight was amazing. A woman said we saved her life. Literally. Thank you for giving me purpose. Calvin smiled, pocketing his phone. Tomorrow he'd help build a playground at the women's shelter. This weekend, dinner with Samantha and Kristen. Next month, the Foundation's first anniversary gala. Life moved forward, built on stronger foundations than before. The storm had passed, leaving clear skies and the promise of something better. 2 years later, Calvin stood on the deck of his new home in Socorro, watching the sunrise paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The ranch sprawled across 50 acres, modest compared to the Tanoan mansions but perfect for their needs. Horses grazed in the paddock, chickens pecked around the garden, and in the workshop, half-finished furniture waited for his attention. "Dad! Sam says breakfast is ready," Kristen called from the kitchen window, now 10 and growing like a desert wildflower after rain. Calvin smiled at the easy way she said Sam, not Mom. They'd agreed that title belonged to Patricia despite everything but family nonetheless. He'd married Samantha Chen in a quiet ceremony 6 months ago, with Kristen as the enthusiastic flower girl and Jerry as best man. Inside, the kitchen smelled of coffee and green chile. Samantha stood at the stove, her law degree now serving the Lighthouse Foundation full-time. She'd left private practice the day after their wedding, joking that one lawyer in the family was enough. "Eleanor called," she said, kissing his cheek. "The Phoenix branch is exceeding projections. Wants to know if you'll speak at the opening." "Maybe. Depends on Patricia's schedule." It was visitation weekend. Patricia would arrive at noon to pick up Kristen, now for unsupervised overnight visits that had gradually rebuilt their relationship. The woman who'd once schemed his destruction now sent careful, respectful texts about pickup times and Kristen's needs. "How's the book coming?" Samantha asked, nodding toward Calvin's laptop on the counter. "Slowly. Turns out writing about betrayal is harder than living through it." The publisher had approached him 6 months ago, wanting the real story behind the Lighthouse Foundation. Calvin had resisted, then realized his story might help others recognize the signs he'd missed. The advance would fund scholarships for children affected by parental betrayal. A car pulled up the drive, not Patricia's practical Honda, but Teresa's newly purchased SUV. She emerged with her 18-month-old son, Marcus, named after their father who'd died disappointed in both daughters. "Sorry we're early," Teresa said, hefting the toddler. "Someone decided 5 a.m. was party time." "No problem. Kristen's been asking for cousin time." Teresa had surprised everyone by maintaining her sobriety, getting married to her sponsor, a decision Calvin had questioned until he met the man and becoming a devoted mother. She ran 3 support groups now and was pursuing her counseling degree online. "Patricia texted," Teresa said carefully. "Asked if I could buffer the pickup. Things are tough with the baby." "Ah, yes." Patricia's son, Christopher, now approaching terrible 2s with a father in federal prison. Miles had never even met the child, his parental rights terminated by the court. Patricia was raising him alone, working as a marketing coordinator for a small firm that didn't care about her past. "She can come in," Calvin said. "We're past the door-drop stage." And they were. The sharp edges of betrayal had worn smooth through time and deliberate effort. Patricia had proven herself through consistent action therapy, stable employment, genuine effort with Kristen. She'd even sent a wedding gift when Calvin remarried, a simple card that read, Be happy. You deserve it. By noon, the house bustled with activity. Kristen played with Marcus in the living room while Teresa helped Samantha prepare lunch. Calvin retreated to his workshop, needing the meditative focus of sanding wood. He was shaping a jewelry box, Kristen's Christmas gift, when footsteps approached. Patricia stood in the doorway, Christopher on her hip, both dressed for the unseasonably warm December day. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi, Kristen's inside. Want some water? You look tired?" She laughed, bouncing the fussy toddler. Understatement of the year. Single motherhood is educational. Calvin grabbed 2 bottles from the workshop fridge, studying his ex-wife. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by practical jeans and a shirt stained with what looked like applesauce. Her face showed lines that hadn't been there before, but also a piece that had been missing during their marriage. "How's the job?" "Good. They promoted me to senior coordinator. Not exactly running campaigns for megalomaniacs anymore, but it pays the bills." She shifted Christopher to her other hip. "I heard about the book. Are you going to destroy me all over again?" "It's not about destroying anyone. It's about understanding how good people make terrible choices, how love can become toxic, how to rebuild after everything burns down." Patricia nodded slowly. "Will you include the good times? We had those too before I lost my mind. Of course, 15 years can't be erased by 6 months of insanity." "Longer than 6 months," she admitted. "I was unhappy for years. I just didn't know how to fix it without destroying everything." She looked at the jewelry box taking shape. "You were always good with your hands, building things to last." "Some things aren't meant to last. They're meant to teach us what we really need." Christopher started crying, reaching for the sawdust-covered floor. Patricia sighed. "I should get Kristen. Long drive back to Phoenix." They walked to the house together, a divorced couple who'd found their way to something resembling friendship. Inside, Kristen had her backpack ready, excited about her weekend with Mom and her half-brother she'd grown to adore. "Be good for your mom," Calvin said, hugging her tight. "Always am. Bye, Dad. Bye, Sam. Bye, Aunt Teresa. Bye, Marcus." She whirlwinded out the door, Patricia following with a wave. That evening, with the house quiet, Calvin and Samantha sat on the deck watching the sunset. The desert stretched endlessly, punctuated by mesas and the distant mountains. "Any regrets?" Samantha asked, threading her fingers through his. "About which part?" "Any of it. The marriage, the divorce, the very public destruction of your ex-wife's life." Calvin considered. "I regret that Kristen had to see her parents at their worst. I regret not seeing the signs earlier. But the rest? It led me here, to you, to the foundation, to work that matters." "Very zen of you." "Hardly. I still have moments where I want to punch Miles Montgomery in his smug face, but prison's doing that for me." They laughed, comfortable in their imperfect happiness. Calvin's phone buzzed a text from one of their foundation clients, thanking him for the emergency legal help that had gotten her children back from an abusive ex. "Another save," Samantha noted. "Another family with a chance. That's all we can offer, chances." Later that night, Calvin sat at his laptop, working on the final chapter of his book. He'd decided to end not with the dramatic courtroom victories or Patricia's tearful breakdown, but with a quiet moment 2 years later. A scarred family learning to coexist, a betrayed man who'd found love again, a little girl who could love both parents despite their failures. He typed, "We tell ourselves that broken things can't be beautiful, but in the desert, the most stunning flowers bloom from the harshest conditions. They grow not despite the difficulties, but because of them. My family, all of it, the broken and rebuilt parts, is my desert bloom, imperfect, resilient, and unexpectedly beautiful." His phone lit up with a video from Patricia. Kristen reading to Christopher, both children giggling at the silly voices she made. No agenda, no manipulation, just a mother sharing a moment of joy. Calvin smiled and saved the document. Tomorrow he'd send the final manuscript to the publisher. This weekend he'd teach Kristen woodworking in the shop. Next month the foundation would open its 3rd location. Life had become less about the storm that had destroyed everything and more about what grew in its aftermath. In the high desert of New Mexico, Calvin Mitchell had learned the most important lesson of construction. Sometimes you had to tear down to the foundation before you could build something truly lasting. And what he'd built, imperfect, complex, but honest, was worth every moment of pain it had taken to get there. The stars emerged over Socorro, brilliant in the clear desert air. Inside, Samantha was reading legal briefs, preparing to fight for another family in crisis. In Phoenix, Patricia was probably wrestling Christopher into pajamas while Kristen helped. In federal prison, Miles Montgomery was serving year 3 of his sentence. In rehab centers across the state, Teresa's story inspired others to fight their demons. Everyone exactly where they needed to be, playing their part in the strange symphony of aftermath. Calvin closed his laptop and went inside to his wife, leaving the past where it belonged acknowledged, processed, and finally released. The man who'd once hidden his pain under suburban perfection now wore his scars openly, using them to light the way for others lost in their own storms. In the end, that's all any of us can do. Survive our betrayals, learn from our mistakes, and build something better from the rubble. Even if it takes a lifetime to learn that the strongest foundations aren't built on perfection, but on truth.